I recently faced my own worst nightmare. 3 men in vests labeled HOA inspector tried to welfare check my son's bedroom in the middle of the night. And their excuse? They said they were ensuring emergency bylaw compliance. The funny thing is, the only emergency that night was when his father and 2 SEALs taught them a lesson they would never forget. But let me start from the beginning. The knock on the door wasn't a knock. It was a statement. 3 sharp, concussive thuds vibrated through the floorboards, the kind of knock that doesn't ask. It tells. My eyes snapped open. The clock on the nightstand read 5:32 a.m. Dawn was just a rumor, a faint gray suggestion on the eastern horizon. Beside me, Emily stirred, her breathing pattern changing from the slow rhythm of sleep to the shallow, alert stillness of a listening ear. I was already out of bed, moving silently, my feet finding their familiar path in the dark. My body remembered this feeling, the sudden, unwelcome intrusion of the outside world into a secured space. It was a language I hadn't spoken in years, but a language you never truly forget. My hand closed around the cold, heavy metal of the mag light I keep on the dresser. Not for the light, but for the weight. Dan? Emily's voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 questions. I glanced back at her. She was already sitting up, her silhouette framed by the pale light of the window. I gave a slight shake of my head, a signal to stay put, stay quiet. I crept to the top of the stairs, my movements fluid and economical. No wasted energy, no noise. Downstairs in the guest room, I heard a faint shuffle. That would be Ben and Chris, my old teammates. They were in town for the week, old SEAL teammates on a short visit. A few days of fishing, grilling, and telling the same old lies we'd been telling each other for 2 decades. Their instincts were as sharp as mine. They were awake. They were listening. They were assessing. The thudding came again, louder this time, more insistent, impatient. This was not a friendly visit, not a neighbor with a dead battery. This was something else. Wrong house to test at dawn. My phone buzzed. Welfare check requested by HOA concern over teen distress at the Hale home. Footer, Sharon Pierce. I reached the bottom of the stairs and flattened myself against the wall beside the front door. The peephole was my first checkpoint. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the distorted, fisheye view of my own porch. 3 men, large. They wore black vests over black polo shirts. On the vests, in stark yellow letters, were the words HOA Inspector, Homeowners Association. A surge of something between annoyance and disbelief went through me. Our HOA was run by a woman named Sharon Pierce, a petty tyrant who seemed to live for issuing fines for grass that was a 1/4 inch too long. Last month, she shut down a kid's lemonade stand for traffic risk and fined a disabled vet for a non-compliant ramp color. That's Sharon. But this was a new level of absurdity. They looked less like inspectors and more like a collection agency that specialized in breaking kneecaps. One of them, the leader by the look of him, had a clipboard. He was balding with a thick neck that bulged over the collar of his shirt. The other 2 were flanking him, standing at parade rest like a couple of overzealous security guards at a rock concert. Behind me, Emily appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She held her phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her face was a mask of calm, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She had been a trauma nurse for 15 years. She knew how to function when the world went sideways. She was my rock, my partner. She wasn't just my wife. She was the anchor that kept my ship steady in any storm. What is it? She mouthed silently. I held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the letters on their vests. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion. HOA. At this hour? It made no sense. And that was the first red flag. When things don't make sense, you pay attention. You pay very close attention. I saw Ben and Chris emerge from the guest room hallway. They were dressed in shorts and t-shirts, but they moved with a purpose that turned casual clothes into a uniform. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They saw me, they saw the situation, and they fell into place. Chris ghosted left, out of the eye line, covering the angle. Ben loomed behind me, calm, huge. Chris stayed a shadow. We were a triangle of force, a problem for anyone thinking of making a bad decision. The man with the clipboard pounded the door again. Daniel Hale, we know you're in there. Open the door. HOA business. His voice was gravelly and impatient. I looked at Emily. I nodded. She understood immediately. Her thumb swiped across her phone screen, and she tapped the speaker icon. A calm female voice filled the foyer. 911. What is your emergency? Emily's voice was steady, clear, precise. My name is Emily Hale. My address is 121 Arbor Lane. There are 3 men on my front porch attempting to force entry into my home. They are claiming to be from the homeowners association. It is 5:35 in the morning. She was logging the details, creating an official record in real time. It was brilliant. It was Emily. The leader outside must have heard the 911 operator. His face soured. Cut the games, lady. We have a work order. We need to speak to your son, Alex. He's a teenager, I thought. You're not seeing him. My blood went cold. Alex. My 15-year-old son. Every protective instinct in my body went into overdrive. The game had just changed. This wasn't about grass length or a misplaced garbage can. This was about my son. The question echoed in my mind. A cold, hard bell of certainty. How far will a man go to defend his own? The answer was simple. As far as it takes. I decided it was time for a conversation. I undid the deadbolt with a loud, deliberate click. Then I turned the knob. I did not, however, unchain the door. The brass chain was a small thing, but it was a barrier. It was a line. I opened the door to the length of the chain. The cool morning air washed over my face. The 3 men stared at me, their expressions a mix of surprise and aggression. The leader, clipboard guy, shoved a piece of paper toward my face. Work order, he grunted. We need to inspect the boys' room. Reports of unauthorized equipment. I didn't look at the paper. I looked at his eyes. They were flat, empty. The eyes of a man following orders he didn't care to understand. It's not going to happen, I said. My voice was quiet, level. You're on private property. The police have been called. I suggest you leave. My tone was conversational, but the message was not a request. For a moment, we were in a standoff. Me in my pajamas, the door chained, them in their ridiculous tactical vests. Behind me, the 911 operator's voice was still audible, a calm counterpoint to the tension on the porch. And just visible over my shoulder, I made sure they could see Ben, a 6'4", 240-pound slab of Hawaiian muscle. Chris stayed just out of sight, a surprise for later if they needed one. Clipboard guy was not a student of subtle hints. He made his decision. It was the wrong one. With a snarl, he lowered his shoulder and shoved the door. He put his full weight into it. He expected the chain to snap, the door to fly open, for me to stumble backward. He miscalculated. The chain strained, the wood of the door frame groaning in protest. But I had been expecting it. My body was already coiled. As the door slammed against the chain, I didn't resist the force. I redirected it. My left hand shot through the gap, not to push back, but to greet his incoming momentum. I clamped down on his wrist, my fingers finding the precise pressure points, the bundle of nerves just above the joint. It's a simple technique, wrist control. You use their own strength against them. His forward momentum became his prison. He was now physically attached to my door. His eyes widened in shock, then pain. A grunt escaped his lips. He tried to pull back, but my grip was a vice. The chain, which he had intended to break, was now the very thing holding him in place. Bent at an awkward angle, his arm trapped. Let go of me, he hissed, his face turning a blotchy red. That's assault. I almost laughed. No, I said, my voice still calm. You're detained until deputies arrive. You're trespassing, and you just attempted to force entry. That's breaking and entering. You might want to stay quiet. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I squeezed his wrist just a fraction, a gentle reminder of the physics of the situation. He winced. That joint only bends one way. Guess which? The other 2 goons looked on, their confidence evaporating. They had come here expecting to intimidate a suburban dad. They had found something else. They looked from their trapped leader to my face, then past me to the looming shape of Ben in the hallway. They did the math. The answer was not in their favor. Bad math, Ben murmured. Wrong house. I let it hang there. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and their primary asset was currently attached to my door like a badly installed knocker. Their bluff had been called, the suburban quiet was shattered, and the real game had just begun. The 2 backup thugs exchanged a nervous glance. Their bravado was a cheap suit, and the seams were splitting. They hadn't signed up for this. They were bullies, used to people folding. When the target doesn't fold, the bully's playbook runs out of pages. The one on the right, a lanky guy with a bad haircut, took a half step back. The one on the left just kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting from my hand on his boss's wrist to the street, probably looking for the flashing lights he knew were coming. Clipboard guy, still pinned, tried to twist his arm away. A bad move. It only tightened my grip and torqued his joint into a position nature never intended. A sharp yelp of pain escaped him. I wouldn't do that, I advised, my voice as flat as a Kansas horizon. You'll just hurt yourself. Get him off me. He barked at his 2 employees of the month. They looked at each other, then at me. They saw my expression. It was not angry. It was not scared. It was patient. I was perfectly content to stand here all morning. My grip was a mechanical certainty. Their leader was not going anywhere unless I decided to let him go. They were starting to understand that they were not the predators here. They had stumbled into the wrong den. The lanky one made a motion as if to step forward and try to pry my hand away. Chris chose that exact moment to step into the doorway right behind Ben. He was smaller than Ben, wiry and coiled, but he had a look in his eyes that could curdle milk, a look that said he had seen the worst of the world and was not impressed by this little porch drama. The thug froze. He had been calculating the odds based on 2 opponents. The equation had changed again. Now it was 3 against 2 with their leader incapacitated. The math was getting worse and worse for them. The distant, rising siren was the final nail in their coffin of bad ideas. It was still faint, but it was unmistakable. It was the sound of official involvement, the sound of paperwork and questions they absolutely did not want to answer. Panic flared in Clipboard Guy's eyes. "Let's go now," he yelled, his voice cracking. He gave one last, desperate wrench against my grip. The brass chain, stressed beyond its limit, finally snapped with a sharp crack. The sudden release of tension sent him stumbling backward into his 2 cronies. They untangled themselves like a trio of clumsy clowns, their coordinated intimidation act completely dissolving into a frantic retreat. They didn't even bother with a parting threat. They just turned and ran, scrambling off my porch and across the lawn. Their professionalism, if it ever existed, was gone. This was pure, unadulterated flight. They piled into a black work van that was parked across the street, engine already running. It was one of those windowless cargo vans, the kind that always looks vaguely suspicious. The driver, who I now realized must have been a 4th man, didn't wait for the door to close properly. He stomped on the gas. The tires squealed on the pavement, leaving a strip of black rubber on the quiet suburban asphalt. The side door was still sliding shut as the van lurched forward, making a hard, uncontrolled turn. It was a panic move, and panic drivers make mistakes. The rear of the van fishtailed wildly, its back corner connecting with my mailbox. There was a sickening crunch of metal on metal. The mailbox, a sturdy steel affair that I had cemented into the ground myself, was ripped from its post and sent spinning into the street. It was a small thing, a piece of collateral damage, but it was sloppy. It was evidence. They were leaving a trail. The van blew the stop sign and vanished. Siren inbound, chain splintered, tire gouges, mailbox down a single white rectangle on the mat. Bait they forgot to steal back. I pointed at the white rectangle on the doormat. "Don't touch it," I said. We left it where it lay for the deputies. It was a work order, just as he'd said. It had the HOA logo at the top, a poorly photocopied crest of our neighborhood, the Willows. The order authorized an emergency inspection of my property, citing violations of community bylaws regarding unauthorized electronic transmission equipment. The reason was gibberish, a word salad of bureaucratic nonsense. But the target was specific: access to the room of the minor, Alex Hale. At the bottom was a signature, a messy, arrogant scrawl. Sharon Pierce, President, the Willows HOA. My eyes narrowed. Sharon. Of course, it always came back to Sharon. But this was a quantum leap from her usual brand of tyranny. Finding neighbor Tom for leaving his recycling bin out for an extra hour was one thing. Sending a goon squad to my house at dawn was something else entirely. This was escalation. This was a declaration. 2 county sheriff's deputies pulled up to the curb, their lights flashing, bathing the street in strobes of red and blue. A younger deputy and an older, more seasoned-looking sergeant got out of the car. Their body cameras were on, the small green lights a clear indicator that everything was being recorded. "Perfect. We got a call about a possible home invasion," the sergeant said. "Dispatch also shows a welfare check from HOA President Sharon Pierce about your teenage son." He checked his notes. "Welfare call hit at 5:20. Your porch knock was 5:32. Looks like a cover story." His eyes swept the scene. Broken chain, dead mailbox, tire gouges. "Something like that," I replied. I held up the forged work order between my thumb and forefinger. "They left this." The sergeant, a man named Ross, took a pair of gloves from his pocket, put them on, and took the paper from me. He read it, his expression unreadable. He looked up at me, then at the HOA logo. "Sharon Pierce," he said, more a statement than a question. It seemed her reputation preceded her. "You have any idea why they'd be so interested in your son's room?" he asked. His tone was professional, but his eyes were sharp. He was asking the right question, the one I was just starting to figure out myself. "I have a theory," I said, "but I think my son has the proof." The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture I did not like at all. This wasn't just about a petty HOA dispute anymore. This was about something they were desperate to hide. And whatever it was, my son had seen it. Sergeant Ross bagged the forged work order. "Chain of custody," he said simply, sealing the plastic bag and marking it with the date, time, and location. I appreciated the professionalism. It was a language I understood. Ross's younger partner, Deputy Carter, was taking pictures of the tire marks, the broken chain, and the mangled corpse of my mailbox. Emily was giving her statement, her voice calm and factual, recounting the timeline with the precision of a nurse reading a patient's chart. Time of knock, content of threats, physical actions, vehicle description, black van, no windows, side sliding door. She missed nothing. She was building the foundation of the case. While they worked, I went upstairs. Alex's door was closed. I knocked softly. "Alex, it's Dad. You awake?" The door opened a crack. My son's face appeared, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. He was 15, a bundle of lanky limbs and surging hormones, but he had a good head on his shoulders. "I heard yelling," he said. "And the van. I saw it peel out from my window." I stepped into his room. It was the typical teenage boy's habitat. Clothes on the floor, posters on the wall, and in the corner, his workstation, a powerful computer, multiple monitors, and on a shelf above it, his drone. A DJI Mavic 3, his pride and joy. He had saved up for it for a year, mowing lawns, doing odd jobs for neighbors. He was a gifted pilot, his control of the machine steady and intuitive. "I need to ask you something, buddy," I said, keeping my voice even. "And I need you to be completely honest with me. No matter what, understand." He nodded, his expression serious. "Did you film something recently? Something you maybe shouldn't have?" He hesitated for a second, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. He thought he was in trouble. "Just some practice flights," he said. "Down by the old quarry. I wasn't spying on anyone, I swear." I put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not mad, Alex. This is important. A black van. The same one that was just out front. Have you seen it before?" His eyes lit up with recognition. "Yeah," he said, turning to his computer. "Yeah, I think so. 2 days ago." He clicked his mouse, and a file directory popped up on the screen. He navigated through folders labeled with dates. I was getting some shots of the rock face, practicing tracking shots. This van pulled up on the service road down below. I thought it was weird. Nobody ever goes down there. He double-clicked a video file. The screen filled with a high-def, top-down view of a dirt road. The image was crystal clear, the colors vibrant. The drone's camera was a serious piece of hardware. A few seconds into the video, the black van rolled into the frame and stopped. I was pretty high up, so they didn't see the drone, Alex explained, his voice low. "I was just going to fly away, but then they got out." 2 men emerged from the van. One of them, the driver, stayed behind the wheel. The other 2 went to the back of the van and opened the doors. My breath caught in my throat. They pulled out several large, heavy-duty plastic containers, the kind used for industrial chemicals. Or worse. Alex zoomed in on the footage. The quality held. The men weren't wearing HOA vests. They were in plain clothes. They carried the containers to the edge of the quarry's deep, water-filled pit and began dumping the contents. A thick, dark liquid poured out, staining the clear water. My stomach tightened. Illegal dumping. And not just a few bags of trash. This was something toxic, something they wanted no one to ever find. "I knew it was wrong," Alex whispered. "So I brought the drone down lower, kept it behind the tree line." The camera angle shifted, swooping down and to the side. It was a masterful piece of flying. He was using the terrain for cover. The new angle was from the side, peeking through a gap in the trees. One of the men turned back toward the van. His face turned directly toward the hidden camera. It was him. Clipboard guy, the man who had been on my porch. His face was perfectly, undeniably clear. As he turned, the drone's camera drifted slightly, catching the rear of the van. The license plate was in sharp focus. No motion blur, no distortion. A clean, readable plate. Alex had captured it all. The crime, the vehicle, the face of one of the perpetrators. This little piece of digital data was the reason. This was the unauthorized electronic transmission equipment they were so desperate to find and destroy. They weren't here for my son. They were here for this video. They thought it was just on a memory card in his room. They thought they could break in, grab it, and erase their problem. I looked from the screen to my son. He was watching my face, waiting for my reaction. The fear was gone from his eyes, replaced by a dawning understanding. He realized the connection between his video and the men at our door. "Dad," he started. I didn't mean to. I cut him off. "You did nothing wrong, Alex," I said, my voice firm. "You did everything right. You saw something wrong and you documented it. I'm proud of you." And I was. He had acted responsibly. He had used his skills to uncover a crime. The consequences were not his fault. They belonged to the men in the van and to the person who sent them, Sharon Pierce. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Sharon was the HOA president. The quarry was adjacent to the neighborhood property. Maybe she was getting a kickback to allow the dumping. Maybe it was her own company doing it. Whatever the specifics, her signature on that fake work order tied her directly to the attempt to steal this evidence. She had sent them to my house. She had put my family in danger. The question of how far I would go to defend my own came back, but this time, it had an edge. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about justice. "Okay," I said, my tone shifting from father to strategist. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we make copies. Multiple copies." I pointed to a drawer full of flash drives. "Put one on each of these. Then we upload a copy to our cloud storage, the one with two-factor authentication. Then we encrypt the original file on this hard drive. We create layers. Redundancy. So even if they get this computer, they get nothing." Alex nodded, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. He was in his element. This was his world. While he worked, I pulled out my phone. I had a few calls to make. The first was to Sergeant Ross. The second was to a very specific number, a man I hadn't spoken to in a year, but who owed me a favor, a man who worked in a field that was very good at finding out who owned black vans and what they were hiding. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, methodical calm. They had brought the war to my doorstep. I was about to return the favor. This was no longer just about protecting my house. It was about dismantling theirs. That night, the quiet felt different. It wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. Sergeant Ross had been true to his word. He'd posted a patrol car at the end of our block, a quiet, reassuring presence. But I knew that a single patrol car was a deterrent, not a fortress. The real security had to come from within. After Alex had secured the video files, 3 separate hard copies, one encrypted cloud backup, and the original file triple encrypted on his local machine, I walked the perimeter of my property. I wasn't just looking, I was seeing. I was identifying fields of fire, blind spots, potential entry points. The habits of a former life, never truly discarded, just dormant. The large oak tree in the backyard, good for climbing. The gap in the fence near neighbor Tom's prize-winning rose bushes, a potential ingress point. The motion sensor floodlights I'd installed last year. I checked their batteries. Everything was operational. Emily was a whirlwind of quiet efficiency. She had photographed the damage to the door frame, documented the tire tracks with a tape measure for scale, and written a timeline of events so detailed it could have been submitted as a legal brief. She was the logistics officer of our little 2-person command center. She was my anchor, but she was also my partner in this fight. She knew the stakes. "They're not going to just give up, are they?" she asked as we stood in the kitchen, the only light coming from the small lamp over the sink. "No," I said. "They're desperate. That video ties them to a felony environmental crime, probably federal charges, and it connects Sharon Pierce to a conspiracy. They have too much to lose. Desperate people do stupid things." It was a truth I had seen play out in dusty villages halfway across the world. The dynamics were always the same. Whether it was a warlord or an HOA president, when you corner a rat, it gets vicious. Just after midnight, it happened. I was sitting in the dark living room watching the street when a new sound broke the suburban symphony of crickets and distant traffic, a faint, high-pitched hum. It was a sound I recognized instantly, a drone. But this wasn't Alex's consumer-grade Mavic. This was something different, smaller, faster, more professional. I moved to the back window, peering through the blinds. There it was, a small black shape hovering over my backyard, its small red and green lights blinking like malevolent fireflies. It was a spy drone, small, quiet, and designed for surveillance. As I watched, a small object detached from its underbelly and fell, tumbling end over end. It landed in the middle of the grass with a soft thud. It was a small black box about the size of a deck of cards. A second later, it came to life. A series of intensely bright blue and white lights began to flash erratically, accompanied by a piercing, high-frequency screech. It was a disorientation device, a scare tactic designed to panic, to confuse. Then a small shower of sparks erupted from the side of the box. Not an explosion, but a pyrotechnic effect, like a cheap firework. It was designed to look like it was about to catch fire, to create the illusion of a bigger threat. Amateurs. They were trying to draw us out, to make us run outside in a panic. I wasn't panicked. I was annoyed. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the kitchen sink. I didn't open the back door. I went through the garage, circling around the side of the house. I stayed in the shadows, using the darkness as my cover. The noise box continued its pathetic light and sound show in the middle of my lawn. As I got closer, I saw the sparks were just a simple magnesium strip designed to burn bright and fast. I gave it a short, sharp blast from the fire extinguisher. A cloud of white powder instantly smothered the sparks and muffled the screeching sound. The light show sputtered and died. Threat neutralized. But I knew the box wasn't the real play. It was the distraction. My eyes scanned the perimeter, and there he was, a dark figure clad in black, halfway over the back fence on the far side of the yard near the gap I'd noted earlier. He had been waiting for us to run out the back door, distracted by the noise box, so he could slip in the front. A classic diversion. When the noise box was neutralized so quickly, he must have realized the plan had gone wrong. He hesitated for a moment, one leg over the fence, caught in a moment of indecision. That was all it took. I raised my phone, which was already on a call to Sergeant Ross's direct line. "He's on the back fence," I said, my voice low and calm. He sighed, black hoodie. "He's about to run." The figure seemed to make up his mind. He dropped back outside the fence and took off, running down the alleyway behind the houses. I let him run. You learn more from a mouth that's breathing hard and from a phone that won't stop ringing. He was fast, but he was running into a trap he didn't know existed. "He's headed south down the alley," I relayed to Ross. "He'll come out on Chestnut Avenue." I could hear Ross on the other end, his voice sharp, relaying the information to his units. "Unit 2, position at the south end of the alley behind Arbor Lane. Subject is a male, dark clothing, on foot, heading your way." I walked back into my house as if I were returning from taking out the trash. Emily was waiting, her face pale but resolute. "What was that?" she asked. "Phase 2 of their brilliant plan," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "It failed. We didn't have to wait long." About 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Ross. "We got him," he said. "Picked him up 2 blocks away, winded and trying to act casual." "Did he have anything on him?" I asked. "A pry bar, a set of lockpicks, and a phone that's ringing off the hook with a number labeled boss. I have a feeling we're going to have a nice long chat with this gentleman." I looked out the window. The street was quiet again. The patrol car was still there, but the game had escalated. They had breached my perimeter. They had failed, but they had tried. And they had been sloppy again. They left me a gift on my lawn, and they got one of their own men arrested. Their desperation was making them predictable, and predictable was a weakness I knew how to exploit. They were pushing, and I was getting ready to push back much, much harder. The next morning felt like the calm after a storm, but I knew it was just the eye of the hurricane. The fence runner they had in custody wasn't talking, but his phone was a treasure trove. Sergeant Ross called me early. "The phone our guy was carrying, it's been texting with one number all night. We're getting a warrant for the subscriber info, but I'd bet my pension it's going to lead us right back to your HOA's front office." I wasn't surprised. The pieces were fitting together perfectly. The problem was, the wheels of justice turned slowly. Warrants, subpoenas, interrogations, it all takes time. And in the meantime, my son was still the target. Not for who he was, but for what he had. The video. They had failed to get it at my house twice. They were going to try again. I had to think like them. Where was Alex most vulnerable? The answer was obvious. School. The transition from the school building to my car. A brief window of public exposure. A crowd to blend into. It was the logical next move for a crew of desperate amateurs. I sat down with Alex before he left for school. "Today is going to be a little different," I said. "They might try something at school." I saw a flash of fear in his eyes, and I hated that they had put it there. But he quickly suppressed it, replaced by a look of grim determination. He had my wife's resilience. "What do we do?" he asked. It was we, not you. He was part of the team now. "You do exactly what you do every day," I told him. "You go to class. You talk to your friends. But when that final bell rings, you don't go to the normal pickup spot. You go straight to the principal's office and you wait for me there. No detours, No exceptions. Understand. He nodded. And what are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to be there, I said. But they won't see me. I spent the morning on the phone. My first call was to the school's principal, Mrs. Gable. I explained the situation in calm, measured tones. I didn't embellish. I just stated the facts. The police report numbers, the ongoing investigation, the threat to one of her students. She was, thankfully, a professional. She didn't panic. She listened. My second call was to Sergeant Ross to coordinate. The plan was simple. It was a classic sting operation adapted for a high school parking lot. The key was a decoy. And for that, I had the perfect volunteer, my teammate Chris. He was about my height, and with a baseball cap and a hoodie, he could pass for a generic dad from a distance. More importantly, he knew how to handle himself. The school resource officer, a sharp ex-Marine named Officer Reed, was brought into the loop. He would be the takedown man. He knew the school grounds better than anyone. At 2:45 p.m., I was parked in an observation spot 200 yards from the school's main entrance with a clear line of sight to the pickup area. I had a pair of stabilized binoculars. Chris, wearing a gray hoodie and a nondescript baseball cap, was leaning against my car, scrolling on his phone, looking for all the world like a bored parent waiting for his kid. Emily was parked on the opposite side of the lot, another set of eyes. We were in it. The final bell rang. A flood of teenagers poured out of the school doors, a chaos of backpacks, conversations, and youthful energy. I scanned the parking lot, my eyes moving methodically. I was looking for the black van, but they weren't that stupid. Not this time. I was looking for someone who didn't belong. Someone watching the crowd too intently. And there he was. A man in a blue jacket standing near the bike racks. He wasn't looking at a specific kid. He was scanning, searching. He was looking for Alex. He saw Chris. From his vantage point, Chris matched the general description of Maya dad waiting by the family car. The man in the blue jacket suddenly touched his ear, likely speaking into a hidden microphone. He was getting confirmation. He got his signal. He started moving, not directly toward Chris, but on an intercept course. He was trying to look casual, but his pace was too quick, his shoulders too tense. He was a predator closing in. Chris, playing his part perfectly, looked up from his phone, feigning a look of recognition toward the school doors, as if he had just spotted his son. He took a step away from the car, creating a space between him and the safety of the vehicle. It was the perfect bait. The man in the blue jacket saw his opportunity, the moment of perceived distraction. He closed the distance fast. "Mr. Hale," he said, his voice a low growl. Chris turned, a look of mild surprise on his face. "Yeah." The man didn't waste any more time. He lunged, grabbing for Chris's arm. "You're coming with me," he snarled. He was expecting a startled, compliant suburban dad. He was not prepared for Chris. Chris's body went from relaxed to rock solid in a nanosecond. He didn't pull away. He moved into the grab, controlling the man's momentum. He twisted, using the man's own forward energy to spin him off balance. The attacker, shocked by the resistance, stumbled. It was all the opening Officer Reed needed. He had been moving in from the moment the man made his approach, a silent, swift shadow. "Police, get on the ground." Reed's voice was a cannon blast in the parking lot. The man in the blue jacket, realizing the trap had been sprung, made a break for it. He shoved Chris away and sprinted across the parking lot, dodging between cars. "Cardio's important," Chris sighed, adjusting his cap. He was fast, but Officer Reed was faster. The SRO was a former track star, and he moved with an explosive speed that was breathtaking. He closed the 50-foot gap in seconds. He didn't go for a fancy takedown. It was a perfect, textbook open field tackle. His shoulder drove into the man's midsection, lifting him off his feet. They went down hard on the asphalt, the impact echoing across the lot. The man's head hit the pavement with a sickening thud. Reed was instantly on top of him, one knee pinning his back, his hands expertly cuffing the man's wrists behind him. It was over in less than 10 seconds. Clean, efficient, professional. The clicking sound of the cuffs locking into place was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. Students were stopping, pointing, their phones already out and recording. Another piece of the puzzle, another nail in their coffin, and it was all happening on camera for dozens of witnesses to see. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. One more down. Their crew was getting smaller, and we were just getting started. The aftermath of the school incident was a flurry of official activity. Officer Reed had the suspect, whose name was Vince, in the back of his patrol car. Vince, like the fence runner, was asking for a lawyer and refusing to say a word. But he didn't have to. His actions, witnessed by half the student body and captured on at least 30 different cell phone videos, spoke for him. Attempted kidnapping in broad daylight on school property. The district attorney was going to love this. Sergeant Ross arrived on the scene, and I finally met him face to face. He was exactly as I had pictured him from his voice. Mid-50s, calm, tired eyes that had seen it all, and a firm handshake. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you run a tight operation." "Just a concerned father," I replied. "Your SRO is the real deal." Ross nodded. "Reed's a good man. Glad he was here." We stood by my car as the scene was processed. Ross's team was collecting witness statements and, more importantly, copies of all the cell phone videos. "This is a slam dunk on the assault and attempted abduction," Ross said. "But we need to tie it all together. We need to connect this guy, the guy from last night, and the clowns on your porch directly to Sharon Pierce." I knew what he needed. The motive. The why. "I have something that will help with that," I said. I told him about Alex's drone video. His eyes lit up. "Illegal dumping. That's a state and federal issue. That's a whole different level of trouble. It gives them a powerful motive for all this." I also told him about the spy drone from the night before. They sent a drone to surveil my house and drop a pyrotechnic device. Ross frowned. "We recovered the device. Our tech guys are taking it apart, but proving who was flying it is tough." "Maybe not," I said. "My doorbell camera caught the whole thing. Back at my house, I downloaded the files. The doorbell camera is aimed down the walkway, but it has a wide field of view. When the first 3 inspectors had been on my porch, it had recorded every word. Clipboard guy's voice, clear as a bell. "We need to speak to your son, Alex, and then we need to inspect the boys' room." Reports of unauthorized equipment. It was a direct link between them and their stated purpose of getting to my son's things. The second file was from the night before. The spy drone itself was too high to be seen clearly by the doorbell cam, but its audio sensors were sensitive. It had recorded the high-pitched hum as the drone approached, hovered, and then flew away. But it had also recorded something else. Just as the drone was retreating, a car had driven slowly down my street. The camera's light had reflected off the passenger window. For a split second, you could see the driver's face. It was Sharon Pierce. She was there, watching her little plan unfold. It was circumstantial, but it put her at the scene. But the real prize was the drone clip itself, the little black box it had dropped. It wasn't just a noisemaker. It had a small, embedded camera. It was recording its own little journey of terror. Forensics pulled the memory card, mirrored the clip, and logged it. Ross later handed me a copy. The file on it was short. It showed the view from the drone, the fall, the landing on my lawn, and then my own face as I leaned over it with the fire extinguisher. But right at the beginning of the clip, for about 2 seconds before it was dropped, it was pointed slightly upwards, and it captured a perfect, clear image of the underside of the drone that carried ETA drone with a very specific, custom-built cradle attached to it. It was a unique signature. Find a drone with that cradle, and it's a 1:1 fingerprint. Ross's tech guys could use that. If they found the drone, they could match it to the video. I handed a flash drive with all the files to Ross. "This should help connect the dots," I said. He took it. "This, plus the kids' drone footage of the dumping Dan. This is building a real case. A conspiracy case." He explained that the district attorney's office was already involved. With the new evidence, the audio from the porch, the video of Sharon's car, and the clip from the attacker's own drone, they could start moving faster. "The DA's office has cleared it," Ross said a few hours later after their forensics team had reviewed the files. "The doorbell audio is admissible. The clip from the spy drone is admissible. And Alex's video is the linchpin. It establishes the motive for everything else." This was the turning point. Up until now, we were on defense. We were reacting. Now we had the ammunition to go on the offensive. The legal system was catching up. My wife, Emily, ever the strategist, saw the next move. "The HOA annual meeting is tomorrow night," she said. "It's mandatory. Sharon has to be there." A slow smile spread across my face. "She wouldn't dare not show up," I said. "It would be an admission of guilt." Emily's point was brilliant. Sharon was arrogant. She believed she was untouchable. She would walk into that meeting like a queen addressing her subjects, completely unaware that her kingdom was about to be overthrown. The meeting was a public forum, a place where the truth could be brought into the light in front of the entire community, in front of all the people she had bullied and controlled for years. It was the perfect stage. "We need a way to present the evidence," I said. "Something she can't run from." "Alex," who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "I can edit it all together," he said. The doorbell audio over a picture of the guys on the porch, the clip from their own drone, and the best parts of my video. I can make a presentation. My son, the filmmaker, the weapon they had tried so desperately to neutralize, was about to become the instrument of their undoing. The plan was set. The HOA meeting was no longer going to be about budgets and lawn care. It was going to be a trial, and we were the prosecution. The community center meeting room was packed. It smelled of stale coffee and simmering resentment. This was the annual HOA meeting, the one night a year Sharon Pierce held court. Usually, it was a painful exercise in bureaucratic theater, with Sharon shutting down any dissent with a sharp rap of her gavel and a condescending smile. But tonight was different. There was a buzz in the air. News of the incident at the school had spread like wildfire through the neighborhood's parent network. People were whispering, casting nervous glances at the door. They knew something had happened, but they didn't know the whole story. Emily and I took seats in the back row. Alex was with us, a laptop bag resting at his feet. He was nervous but trying to hide it. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You got this," I whispered. He nodded, his jaw set. Sharon Pierce swept into the room, 5 minutes late, as usual. She wore a power suit and an expression of supreme confidence. She saw the packed room and misinterpreted it as a testament to her importance, not as a gathering of the jury that was about to convict her. She took her place at the head table, flanked by her 2 loyal cronies on the board, a timid man named Arthur and a sour-faced woman named Janice. Neighbor Tom, who was sitting a few rows ahead of us, leaned over to his wife. "She looks smugger than a cat in a creamery," he muttered, just loud enough for us to hear. It was a perfect, if slightly bizarre, summation of her attitude. Sharon banged her gavel. "The meeting will come to order," she announced, her voice echoing slightly in the crowded room. She launched into her usual speech. 20 minutes on petunias, 0 on felony dumping. People shifted in their seats, their patience wearing thin. They weren't here for this. After about 20 minutes of droning on about the new petunia planting initiative, she finally made the mistake of asking, "Is there any new business?" My hand shot up. Emily's went up right beside mine. Sharon's eyes scanned the room and landed on us. A flicker of something annoyance, fear, crossed her face before she masked it with a saccharine smile. "Mr. Hale, so good of you to join us. Do you have a question about the petunias?" A few people snickered. "No, Sharon," I said, my voice calm but carrying easily across the room. "I don't. But I do have a presentation regarding community safety. It will only take 5 minutes." Her smile tightened. "This isn't on the agenda," she said dismissively. "We can table it for the next." "I think the community needs to see this," Emily cut in, her voice firm and clear. "It concerns the black van that's been seen in the neighborhood and the men who tried to kidnap our son from school yesterday." A collective gasp went through the room. The whispers erupted into a loud murmur. Sharon's face went pale. She banged her gavel. "Order! Order! Those are baseless accusations. Your boy flies illegal surveillance," Sharon snapped. "Actions have consequences." "Are they?" I said, standing up. "Then you won't mind if we show everyone the evidence." Alex was already at the front of the room, connecting his laptop to the projector. Before Sharon could react, the lights dimmed and the projector screen flared to life. The first image was a still frame from our doorbell camera, the 3 goons in their fake vests standing on our porch. Then the audio began to play the sound of them pounding on the door, and then Clipboard Guy's voice, clear and chilling. "We need to speak to your son, Alex." The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. The next slide was the forged work order with Sharon's signature magnified to fill the screen. A wave of angry muttering swept through the crowd. "This is liable," Sharon shrieked, her voice shrill. "My signature was forged." "Was it?" I asked calmly. "Because the man you sent to the school yesterday has already been identified, and the man you sent over my fence the night before is in custody, and the man whose face is on this video is the same one who was on my porch." The screen changed. It was Alex's drone footage, the black van, the illegal dumping, and then the crystal-clear close-up of Clipboard Guy's face. People were on their feet now, shouting. Sharon called the cops on their kid and sent those fakes to the house, someone yelled. "That's the guy," someone else yelled. "I saw him near the park." The chaos was building. Sharon was panicking, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. The final piece of evidence played, the clip from the spy drone's camera, showing the view as it fell onto my lawn. The crowd watched, confused, as the image of my grass filled the screen. Then I spoke over it. This is the view from the camera on the device they dropped to spook, using maybe LiDAR mulch if we were sloppy. Their own device. That's when it happened. A moment of pure, beautiful, chaotic justice. Neighbor Tom, who had been getting up to get more coffee, stumbled. He lurched forward, his full cup of coffee flying from his hand in a perfect arc. It sailed through the air and splashed directly onto Sharon's laptop, which sat open in front of her. A shower of hot coffee and cream shorted out the machine with a fizz and a puff of smoke. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry," Tom exclaimed, his face a perfect picture of theatrical clumsiness. In the ensuing confusion, with everyone looking at the smoking laptop and Tom's profuse apologies, Sharon saw her chance. She bolted. She didn't walk. She didn't jog. She ran. She shoved her way through the crowd, out the door, and into the night. Her flight was a confession, a silent, screaming admission of guilt. Why run? I knew why. She didn't know we had multiple copies of the video. In her panicked, arrogant mind, she thought the copy on her now-fried laptop was the only other one in existence. She was running to meet her crew, probably to sell them a story, to get cash, to get out of town. She was running right into our final trap. Sharon's frantic escape from the HOA meeting was the trigger. She was running scared, and scared people make mistakes. My call to Sergeant Ross was brief. She's on the move. She thinks the only other copy of the video was on her laptop, which just got damaged. She's spooked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "We've had a tracker on her car since this morning," Ross said, his voice grimly satisfied. "She's heading for Chestnut Park. We have a team in place. We were just waiting for probable cause to move in." Her fleeing a public meeting after being presented with evidence of a conspiracy, that's our probable cause. Chestnut Park. It was a large, wooded park on the edge of town, full of winding paths and dark corners. A perfect place for a clandestine meeting. A perfect place for an arrest. The deal was supposed to be for a master copy of the video, I relayed. She's likely meeting them to get paid before she disappears. The task force, a joint unit of county sheriffs and state investigators, was already converging. They had been one step ahead the whole time, just waiting for the right moment. I wanted to be there. I needed to see this through. Ross understood. Stay on the perimeter. Do not engage. Let my people do their work. We'll have body cams rolling on everyone. It will all be by the book. I agreed. Emily, Alex, and I drove to the park, parking a quarter-mile from the main entrance where several unmarked police cars were already staged. We could hear the quiet, professional radio chatter. The park was dark, the moon hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. The task force members were ghosts, melting into the shadows. They moved with a silent efficiency that I knew well. They were hunters. From my position, I had a clear view of the designated meeting spot, a small, isolated gazebo near the duck pond. It was lit by a single, dim yellow light. A perfect stage. A few minutes later, Sharon Pierce's sedan pulled into the parking lot. She got out, clutching a briefcase. She looked around nervously, her arrogance replaced by raw fear. She was a cornered animal. She walked quickly toward the gazebo. As she entered the small circle of light, the black van we knew so well pulled up on the service road nearby. The side door slid open. Two men got out. One was the driver from the quarry video. The other was a new face, presumably the overall boss of this sad sack crew. He was older, with a hard face and cold eyes. He carried a small, heavy-looking duffel bag. Cash. They met under the gazebo's roof. The exchange was tense. Sharon held out the briefcase. The boss held out the duffel bag. They were about to make the swap. That's when the world lit up. High-intensity floodlights from a dozen hidden positions suddenly blazed to life, turning the darkness into brilliant day. Police. Nobody move. Hands in the air. The shout came from all directions at once. Sidearms were out, sights low. No shots fired, just hands up everywhere. It was a perfectly executed pincer movement. Sharon screamed, dropping the briefcase. The two men froze, their hands shooting up, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. They were caught. But there's always one. The driver, who had stayed by the van, decided to run for it. He bolted from the driver's seat and sprinted toward the woods, aiming for a dark path that led out of the park. It was a foolish, desperate move. An officer, lean and athletic, was on him in a flash. It wasn't a chase. It was an interception. The takedown was a thing of beauty, no violence, just pure technique. A controlled trip, a spin, and the suspect was face down on the grass before he even knew what happened, cuffs clicking into place. At the same time, Another officer near the gazebo's other exit simply said, "Stay." A large German Shepherd, AK-9 unit, moved silently to block the path, planting its feet and letting out a low, rumbling growl that promised a world of pain for anyone who took another step. The exit was sealed. There was nowhere to run. The scene under the lights was a tableau of failure. Sharon Pierce was sobbing, a pathetic, crumbling ruin of her former self. The boss and his associate stood silent, their faces grim. The task force moved with practiced precision. Every officer had their body camera recording. A lead detective, wearing gloves, approached the dropped briefcase and the duffel bag. "Beginning chain of custody for evidence seizure," he said, his voice clear and formal for the cameras. "One black briefcase, one green duffel bag. Time is 22:47. He carefully opened the duffel bag. It was filled with stacks of bundled cash. He opened Sharon's briefcase. It was full of shredded paper. She had been bluffing, trying to sell them nothing for one last payday. The detective sealed both bags in evidence containers, reading out the case numbers and sealing the tags. It was all done by the book, meticulous, undeniable. I watched from the darkness, a quiet observer. Emily's hand found mine. Alex stood beside us, silent, watching the culmination of what he had started with a simple drone flight. He saw the consequences of his actions, not the negative ones the criminals intended, but the positive ones. The restoration of order, the triumph of right over wrong. But it was more than just my family. It was my community. Sharon's reign of terror was over. Her crew was dismantled. The threat was neutralized. The sight of Sharon Pierce being led away in handcuffs, her face stained with tears, was not a moment of joy. It was a moment of quiet, profound satisfaction. The system had worked. We had trusted the process, and the process had delivered. The night was dark, but for the first time in days, I could see the stars. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during Sharon Pierce's interrogation. Faced with a mountain of evidence and the prospect of a long prison sentence for conspiracy, racketeering, and environmental crimes, she broke. She gave up everyone and everything. Her confession, combined with the forensic analysis of the arrested crew members' phones, painted a complete and damning picture. The text messages were the glue that held the entire conspiracy case together. There were dozens of them, a running log of her criminal enterprise. Text from Sharon to the crew's boss, giving them my work schedule, Emily's nursing shifts, and Alex's school hours. She had been feeding them our lives on a platter, making us vulnerable, all to protect her dirty little secret. The secret was even uglier than we had imagined. The company doing the illegal dumping at the quarry was owned by her brother-in-law. The HOA, under Sharon's sole control, was being paid a hefty consulting fee to look the other way. That money wasn't going into the HOA's accounts. It was going directly into Sharon's pocket. She had been using the Homeowners Association as her personal piggy bank and crime syndicate for years. Alex's drone video wasn't just a threat to her brother-in-law's business. It was a threat to her entire illicit empire. That's why she had been so desperate. The revelation of her embezzlement sent shock waves through the community. The district attorney's office, armed with her confession and bank records, launched a full-scale forensic audit of the HOA's finances. What they found was staggering. Years of falsified invoices, no-bid contracts awarded to shell companies owned by her relatives, and straight-up theft from the reserve funds. The new Petunia initiative she had been so proud of? She had billed the HOA $10,000 for $500 worth of flowers. The rest had vanished. The anger in the neighborhood was palpable. People who had been fined hundreds of dollars for trivial infractions were now realizing that money had likely gone to fund Sharon's lavish vacations. The sense of betrayal was immense. An emergency community meeting was called, this time without Sharon at the helm. The room crackled. No donuts, no small talk, just business. Sergeant Ross gave a brief, professional summary of the case. He couldn't share all the details of the ongoing investigation, but he shared enough. He commended Alex for his courage and integrity, and the room erupted in applause. My son, who was usually so reserved, turned a shade of bright red, but I could see the pride in his eyes. He had made a difference. He had stood up to a bully and won. The primary order of business at the meeting was a recall vote. It wasn't even a contest. The vote to remove Sharon Pierce as HOA president was unanimous. The vote to remove her two cronies, Arthur and Janice, who had clearly been complicit through their willful ignorance, was nearly unanimous as well. A new interim board was elected on the spot. Good people, neighbors I respected. People like Emily, who was nominated and accepted a position as treasurer, tasked with overseeing the financial recovery. The legal fallout was fast. Sharon Pierce and her crew were denied bail. Their phones were singing, and the paper trails were screaming. The state environmental agency took over the quarry, taped it off, and started a cleanup with the bill stapled to Sharon's future. The wheels of justice finally caught, and they bit hard. It wasn't a parade, just a long, relieved exhale. We held the line. I went as far as the law would let me. Strategy over brute force. Warfare with flash drives, doorbell cams, and chain of custody forms instead of rifles. Different tools, same job, protect your people. And my people were safe. A week later, the normal hum returned. The patrol car at the corner was gone. Neighbor Tom installed a new mailbox for USA Steel bunker on a stick-in, accidentally baptized Janice's gnome collection with a soda during the recall chaos. The fierce stink finally aired out. Emily dove into spreadsheets for the new board, turning red ink into order like it was a hobby. She likes a mess she can fix. That night, I stood in Alex's doorway. No games, no screens, just him sketching flight paths. His drone was parked on a shelf, not a weapon, a tool. He'd seen something ugly, captured the truth, and lived to tell it. He looked up. Hey, Dad. Hey, buddy. We good? He nodded, a small, steady smile. The kid had grown a year and a week. Later, the house settled. The heat clicked. The wind nudged the gutters. The street outside breathed easy. This is what I fought for back then and again now. The right to a quiet life.